I don't think that there's such thing as a good or bad memory or good or bad learners. It's just good or bad habits.
All right, right now I'm going to teach you some strategies to help you to improve your reading speed and also your comprehension.
Our life right now is a reflection of our thinking.
There's good habits and bad habits, right? I really do believe that we either learned how to learn properly early on or, it's kind of out of default. I don't think that there's such thing as a good or bad memory or good or bad learners. It's just good or bad habits, trained or not trained. And that's really what it's all about. But I noticed some people make mistakes. So I just wanted to talk about a few mistakes people are making when they go to learn something or to study it, and then maybe a few hacks to be able to get over those mistakes. One of the big ones, and you know this because you and I have talked about this. What I love about your show is it's kind of like how you and I hang out. We go, we get a juice, and if we just record our conversation, it's pretty much like that's how you are. You know what I mean? It's how you are behind
Shawn, another one.
Exactly. So how do you study smart and not just hard? How do you do it? So I would say there's a few things that you want to stop right away. Some of this is going to be common sense. But as we've discussed in the past, common sense is not always common practice. And I really think for people really wanting to make the rest of this year and years coming up, they really want to simplify. Because if we can't simplify, if we make it too complex, it becomes insurmountable and we don't do anything. So simple things that you could do, stop. First of all, I want to encourage people as a reminder to stop multitasking. And we'll get a lot of slack from that. Just like when I tell people not to touch their phone, the first hour of the day, it's hard because it's something that our brains are getting rewired for things, right? And you and I have talked a lot about superheroes and having superpowers, and you keynoted one of our superhero brain events. But I think there are supervillains right now. I think there are three big supervillains that are attacking us, and so it's the three I talk about is the digital ones. First of all, digital overload, which you mentioned. It's too much to learn, too little time. Like taking a sip of water out of a fire hose. How do you keep up with it all? And so we're going to talk about that in this episode on how to study it properly so you can retain it and really master it. The second one is digital distraction.
Right.
Our brains, this, they're getting rewired to just be distracted, to wander all the time. And it seems like part of it is like these smart devices that you mentioned in the intro. It's rewiring our brains, and it's a challenge because if the first thing in the morning, when you're in that very impressionable state, that alpha, theta state in the morning, a relaxed state of awareness, picking up your phone, the first thing is training yourself to be distracted.
Yes, exactly.
And like you studied like decision fatigue and how we can only make a certain amount of good decisions a day. But a lot of people are suffering from just brain fatigue. Right. And part of what's fatiguing people is just going on their phones and getting all these dopamine hits. And every time they get a like and a comment and a share and everything, and if that's the first thing that you're giving your mind in the morning, it's training itself just to be everywhere. And the other thing, the problem with picking up the phone, besides training distraction, is training you to be reactive, which is not what superheroes want to do, right? The first thing in the morning, they don't want to train themselves to just react to everything that's going on, all the fires that we have to fight, and everything that everyone that needs something from us. It's better to be more proactive. But the third enemy, and as I'll go into the solutions, is so you have digital overload and you have digital distraction, and then you have this thing called digital dementia, which you talked about in the past, where we're outsourcing our smarts to our smart devices. And if your brain is like a muscle, it grows stronger with use, but it's use it or lose it. And one of the things I love following you on social media is like your family every morning without fail. It's so inspiring. You're doing all the workouts and you inspire people. And not only just inspiration, it's instructive too. I really think that's what people are looking for. They want to be inspired, but they also want to know what to do. And, and so when we geek out, you and I, we talk about how to do that for your mental muscles, right?
Yes,
just like you make your physical muscles faster, stronger, more agile, more flexible, and give it more energy and strength. You want your mental muscles to be more agile, more focused, sharper, faster, more energized and stronger, obviously, as well. But we're not getting that same exercise because we're so reliant on technology to be able to tell us everything, what to do today and how to, where directions and just everything.
Oh, man. I tried to do some basic calculations the other day.
Yeah.
Man, it was hard. And I was like, I'm not going to use my phone. I use my phone. But even
and that's
that
the
little
thing.
app.
It's tough. This basic algebra is difficult. And here's the thing. It's not that I think we all admit, we want technology because it's very convenient. but as long as it doesn't cripple us at the same time, right? You
Exactly.
see all these movies in the future or animations in the future where everyone's sitting in their pod and being they have their digital device and they're all hooked up to that. And it's just moving around. They're not exercising. They're all overweight and
What
all
was
this
that
stuff.
movie with the little robot?
Which one's that one?
Where the entire future was like people were just so overweight. Wall-E. It was Wall-E.
Right.
And I think he had a little friend who was like, I don't remember her name,
And it's
Ava or something.
and it's not a very pleasant picture of where everyone's going. Very sedentary, not moving, and just kind of not eating the best food as ever. But it's just our minds aren't getting exercise either. New thoughts and new stimulus and new.
We need that. The brain is just like a muscle. We've talked about this before, you and I, and also with Dr. Daniel Amen. It's a muscle that is basically, if you don't use it, you lose it, just like the rest of your muscles.
And that's the best news ever because because it works both ways. And if you're listening to this right now and you're concerned that senior moments are coming a little early and you're absent-minded, it's not your fault. It's just we're not trained on how to do these things. And the good news is that only 1/3 of that potential is predetermined by genetics and biology, but 2/3 is in our control.
Yes.
And it's the things that you're always talking about, eating the right food and getting rid of negative thoughts and exercise and movement and supplementing and being around a positive peer group and clean environment and sleep and brain protection and new learnings and stress management. All these play a role. So I think a good place to start.
Well, before we get to the solutions, man, I want to do a quick recap because these are so important. And you talked about, first of all, something that we need to pay attention to and try to avoid doing is multitasking. And this one is going to be, for a lot of people, it's like, I multitask like a boss. What do you mean? I got to stop multitasking. Well, research shows, and we talked about this with Jay Papasan, who is the author of The One Thing, how literally, if you look at the studies, multitasking makes your brain work about as well as it does when you're high on marijuana. Matter of fact, that they outperform, when you're multitasking. So we have this illusion that we're getting more stuff done, but we're really taking away our proficiency. We're really taking away our ability to execute at our highest level when we're distracted and multitasking. And then you said distractions as well. And the other one is cramming, right?
It is. I mean, we go. I'll touch on each of these things. So the multitasking, I completely agree with you. The research is showing. There's a study at University of London saying that it actually lowers your IQ, similar to if you stayed up all night and pulled an all-nighter, you could drop it 15 points. And so the goal here is you could multitask in terms of doing something physical and something mental. You could be on the phone and going for a walk, but two cognitive intensive tasks, it's not possible to be able to do it. And so people are actually, it's taken anywhere from an extra 5 to 20 minutes to regain your focus and your flow. There's a high level more of errors that's being made if you're trying to multitask. So if you feel like you're multitasking because you want to be a better performer and more productive, it's absolutely not true. It's actually taken away from your productivity. The goal is to do one single mental thing at a time. Really, multitasking is actually a misnomer. It's the more accurate term is called task switching. Because every time you switch tasks, you have to refocus your energy, and so it takes more time, and there's definitely more mistakes. The second thing that you mentioned is just as we're rewiring our brains for distraction, focus is a muscle, just like your memory is a muscle for you. Creativity is a muscle. It's not something you have; it's something you do. It's like you don't have creativity; you do creativity. You don't have memories; you do a memory. You don't have focus, you do focus. And the good thing about making it a process is you can duplicate it, right? There's a recipe there, and because it's a verb as opposed to just, a noun. And so with focus, it's something you could do, but every time, that's the benefit of being mindful, right? I think most of your listeners have some kind of meditation or mindfulness activity that they support every single day. If not, I would highly encourage it. But it's not the 20 minutes or 30 minutes of meditation and getting in that Zen-like state. Certainly that's good to flow through alpha and theta brainwave states and such. And what's even more important, I think, is that every single time you lose your focus and you bring it back in, to a thought or to a mantra or to a point or to a space or to an energy, a gratitude, a feeling, a breath, then you exercise and you build your mental focus, the muscle, your focus muscles. So it's not that you don't lose focus, it's when you bring it back that you get the strength. And so I think one of the things is to be able to set your environment up to win, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about stop multitasking, also eliminate distractions. I mean, to focus, when you need to study, you got to turn your phone off. I mean, people are picking up Instagram
man.
like over 50 times a day,
Yeah.
over 50 times. And if that's something that, if you're doing it less, that means somebody's looking at Instagram even more than you are. And there's ways of using technology for your advantage, right? There's self-control apps like Freedom or Focus Me to block out certain websites, like social media, or block out sites that you might visit, when you should be focusing on something else.
Right.
So that's the other thing is and when I talk about focus, the metaphor that I use is that if you're outside and it's a nice warm day and you have a magnifying glass, you remember when you were kids, you used to burn like leaves and stuff like that?
Yeah.
When you see the light go through the magnifying glass, it creates a very bright focused point there that is very highly concentrated. And it's interesting that the word bright describes it because we use the word bright to describe really smart, intelligent people, right?
Yeah.
But maybe they're not smarter, maybe they're just better focused, like that magnifying glass is doing to the light. And so there's a lot of power in being focused, in being so if you want to study better.
I want you to talk about, if you can, is this concept, and this was the first time I ever heard this was from you, of recognition versus recollection when we're actually doing this work to study and assimilate things.
Right, because, so one of the things that I think that keeps people from learning faster is they're so passive about it, right? It's this idea between passive and active recall. And, I actually recommend people don't reread chapters of their nonfiction book. I mean, a lot of people will read something and reread it again, thinking they're going to get more out of it the second time, right afterwards. And certainly it is, but it's marginal returns because you could easily, here's the thing, what people found out by rereading things is to study, right? Is that they could delude themselves thinking that you really know the information when you're reading it, instead of the better thing to do is to test yourself, because it's like, for example, you read the chapter and then instead of rereading that same chapter, close the book and recall and recite all you can remember, because there is a difference between recognition and recollection. Meaning recognition requires a trigger for you to remember something that you might not get on the test. It's like when somebody recognizes a face. They don't necessarily remember the face. What they're doing is they're recognizing it because it's right in front of them, and they realize that they've seen it before. One of the reasons why names are so difficult sometimes is because you don't get that same prompt. You get the prompt for the person's face, but you don't get that prompt or that trigger for the person's name. And so studying actively with focus on recollection as opposed to recognizing something, one of the things to best do that is to quiz yourself. Read something and then ask yourself these questions, because often questions are the answer. And I think a lot of people, Shawn, like when they're reading and people like, Jim, and we did a whole podcast episode on speed reading. People are like, how do you read a book a week, or how do you read a book a day? And one of the ways you could do it is, and how do you really understand and retain it? And I'll tell you that if you want greater speed, I always tell people to use their finger while they read. A visual pacer will help boost your reading speed 25-50%. But if you want greater comprehension, you have to train yourself to ask better questions, ask more questions and ask better questions, because as you're reading, they act like a magnet. It's like, there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer. And I think part of being more active in recollection is actually asking yourself, what do I want to learn out of this? How does this compare to what I already know? How am I going to teach this to somebody else? Because that's all thinking is just this process of asking new questions and answering them also as well. And so I'm a big believer is that just don't fool yourself into thinking that you know something because you could recognize it. See if you could really retain it and recollect it by quizzing yourself as you're learning it, something brand new. The other thing I want to mention also is you mentioned this at the top, is just stop cramming. And the reason why cramming is a big mistake is because they've done studies where they found that the average person loses their focus after 25 or 30 minutes. It's like a kind of like a TV show, and that's our attention span for a lot of things. And so there's this time management technique called the pomodoro technique, which basically means you're setting your alarm every 25, 30, maybe 45 minutes. And when it's done, you take a break. You take not a 25 or 30 minute break, but you're taking a 2, 3, 4, 5 minute break to do things that are good for your brain. So what are those things? Movement is very good.
Yeah.
Most people are way too sedentary. They're sitting all day, 8 hours a day, and that's bad for you, obviously. So movement is key, because as your body moves, your brain grooves. The other thing I would suggest is deep breathing, whether it's box breathing, alpha breathing, Wim Hof, whatever, people subscribe to, and to get the oxygen. And also hydrate, obviously. And it's, again, very, very fundamental, but so many people dabble in these things when they really should really master this process.
Yeah.
Because your power comes from the fundamentals. And so I would go back to, and the other reason why you don't want to cram is because if you study for 6 hours straight, not only are you diminishing returns because your focus after the past half an hour is, there's these two memory phenomenons. One's called primacy and the other one's called recency. Primacy means that you tend to remember something at the beginning. So if you go to a party and you remember the people you first met, recency says you remember things more recent. So if you're at the party, you remember the names of the last people that you met at the party, and you probably forget most of the people in between. Same thing with a list of words. If I gave people a list of 30 words to memorize, they probably remember the ones in the beginning, primacy, and then more recent, recency. And the reason why you want to take breaks every half an hour, 45 minutes is because, you can imagine after like a 6 hour studies time, you learn stuff in the beginning, you retain stuff at the end, but in the middle there's a big dip.
Right.
But by creating breaks, let's say every hour, you create more beginnings and ends, and more primacy and recency, so you pick up a whole lot more data and recollection. So don't cram. And then I would say the fourth thing that I would stay away from, besides stop multitasking, stop distracting yourself by controlling your environment, eliminating distraction, turning off your phones, and so on. Don't cram, because that's a big mistake, because you're actually losing ground, is hack this thing called acrasia. And acrasia is this state, and we know what it is. I mean, it's kind of like that state where you're acting against your own better judgment.
Right.
It was
Why
really,
do we do that?
Exactly. And so Socrates, Plato, it was in one of his books, asked precisely, how is this possible? If one judges action A to be the best course of action, why would anyone do anything other than A, right? But we do. We're not always logical. If anything, we're more biological, right? We're more emotional. It's like, why do we do this? Why do we eat foods that are not good for us? Why do we not journal and meditate and work out and eat good food? Why don't we do that all the time if that's in our best interest? And so that's what acrasia is. It's this acting against your own better judgment. And so there are apps out there that helps people to stick with their decisions and their habits and stuff. So there's an app called Stick, STICK, I believe. There's one called BeMinder, also as well, to help you keep you to your commitments. I did a whole episode on our podcast about like how to stop procrastinating, and that's one of the big things. There's something called the Zeigarnik effect. Zeigarnik effect actually is a memory principle named after this psychologist in Europe who was watching as she was getting coffee that the wait staff would remember everyone's order. And like how do they do that naturally without any kind of training? And they called it the Zeigarnik effect, basically that they would remember the old person's order up to the point that it was fulfilled. And then after it was fulfilled and they got what they ordered, the meal, then that would just disappear. But the idea here is that if you have something in your life that you're procrastinating about, that if you just start something, you're more likely to finish it because the brain needs closure. It doesn't like open loops.
Right.
You know,
that's how the greatest kind of golden age of TV is getting us right now. Like these writers are so good at opening these loops. It's like you have to know what happens. Like what is going to happen with Coulson?
Exactly. And then you binge watch like 8 episodes of like, Scandal or
just one more,
or whatever
just
it is,
one more,
because they have all these open loops. But we are like that with our life. That if we start something, we have this big drive to need to close it off. And so start something, somewhere. That we could definitely help you with that. But that's the Zeigarnik effect. But so those are the 4 things that I would ask people to stop, because you want to stop something, but you can't just stop something. You want to start it. So stop multitasking. Stop. Eliminate distractions in your life. Don't cram. Stop cramming. Always take a break every 30, 45 minutes. And then hack this thing called acrasia, which is this idea where we don't finish the things that are good for us.
What do you think about listening to music while you study? I personally, I like more of a quiet environment, but I do sometimes tune in and listen to certain, it's instrumentals, So what do you think about like maybe somebody's like listening to Tupac trying to study algebra versus like classical music?
So a lot of, and this is, I think a lot of the parents could relate to this. When they hear their kids studying, they have the, Pandora or Spotify in the background and the TV and the video games. They're like multitasking, up the wazoo. I would say that music has been shown to enhance the studying process as long as it's not distracting. So I'm not talking about music like hip hop or heavy metal, rap. The music that's been shown to support studying is classical music, as you would think, instrumentals, specifically of the Baroque era. So Vivaldi, Bach, because that era happens to have music a lot concentrated on 60 beats per minute, which also happens to be the resting heart rate. And so it puts you into this, what they call this alpha state, this alpha brainwave state, which is that relaxed state of awareness. And that's the state we go in when we meditate. It's the state we go in when we watch television. It's the state we go in when we do hypnosis. It's where you become highly suggestible. And so when you're studying something, it helps. Let's say you want to, and I believe that if you combine music with spaced repetition. So like we talked about the 4 challenges that you need to stop, the bad habits like multitasking, cramming and such. There are 4 things I would recommend people do. So one of them was we talked about is practicing active recall by quizzing yourself. So it's the difference between recognizing and recollecting something. The second thing I would say where you can combine with music is this thing called spaced repetition. So that's the idea where, yes, you can learn information by deeply immersing yourself. And another way of learning something is by spacing it out. That through this kind of interval learning or recall, if you will, that if you space things out that you're learning and review it maybe an hour later, a day later, a week later, a few weeks later, then you could drive it from your short to long-term memory. There's actually good software out there like Anki, A-N-K-I. It's like these repetition software flashcards. So for people that want to learn a language, I would, for example, or something that's could be more repetitive. So what they could do is they can combine spaced repetition with music, like the Baroque music, to learn a language, to study for the medical law exams, to memorize names and faces, to brush up on your geography, to master a poem or lines, in a play or in a film, practicing even musical chords. Could help you also. Spaced repetition is a very powerful way of driving it deeper inside of you.
Yeah, I think I heard the word intervals in there. And so it's like how, and this is clinically proven across the board for interval training and exercise to be so much more effective and efficient than that kind of long duration, steady state studying / cardio confessional that we would do.
That's exactly it. This is just for the mind. This is like mental interval training. And so it's that spaced repetition really helps, and that spaced review helps a lot because it's in that downtime that actually we're getting a lot of the integration and things are moving from short term to long term. So I would say practice the active recall by asking questions and quizzing yourself. Have spaced repetition. Add the music that we're talking about here. It can really accelerate it as long as it's not distracting for people. It's helping to relax you, put you in a brainwave state where you absorb faster. It's more your unconscious, where your conscious mind can only handle so much, right? That's the part that really gets stressed over everything. And you think about all this, for example, lyrics to songs that we know. I mean, how many of them? Hundreds, right? But how many do we actually study this and write it out? And none of them, right? We all learned when we didn't realize we were learning. We were just having fun. Exactly. And that's really that unconscious mind that's really processing.
Holy smokes, man. Wait, man, you just hit something here.
Yeah, let's do it.
The other day, there was a song from 20 years ago that came on the radio. And I haven't heard in years, and just I knew all the lyrics. And I was just like, what? I started to really think about how is that possible,
Exactly. And so we learn, we know so much more. We didn't actually learn it in school or anything. We learned so much more than we've ever given ourselves credit for. And so part of it is because we were just in that unconscious, playful state. And I feel like that's a powerful way to learn is just like children. Children have that beginner's mind, and we're having. Remember what we've talked about in the past, that information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. So that's why, we remember things through sense, through taste, music. That's bringing us back when we're children, and music is highly, state-inducing. And so that's high level of emotion. And speaking of sense, I would actually add that as a third thing. So besides active recall and spaced repetition with music, I would actually add the sense of smell, because the sense of smell is the most powerful sense that we have when it comes to connecting to our nervous system. Meaning that, I don't know if it was because we needed to smell poison before it actually, to save our life or something. But here's the thing, our environment gets connected to the information. So if you want even better studying, because that's the theme of what we're talking about, it always helps to study in the environment where you need to recollect the information. So for example, here right now, I'm doing programs here in Boston area for their colleges and stuff. It would help them to study in the lecture center that they're going to be tested in, because unconsciously we connect that. And it's something I mentioned before, where they did this study and they put students underwater with breathing apparatus, and they give them words to memorize, and they take them outside back in the surface to test them, and they put them back in the water and test them. And then which one do you think people remembered more? Back in the water, right? Because that environment got connected to the information. And so knowing that, then studying in the place, for example, in your workplace where you need to give the speech or that TED talk, it always helps to study in that environment. And it's not really practical for most people. So the idea here is to actually, can you take the environment in with you? And meaning using the sense of smell, that if you had a unique, unfamiliar scent that while you're studying, one of the methods could help you jog your memory, has spray that on you or taste it during the actual exam. When you have to give that presentation, that book report, or take that test, that if you chew a strange kind of gum or essential oil, or perfume or cologne, and then you have that same one when you need to recall it, it's going to be more available to you. And so I would recommend playing with that. And speaking of essential oils, there are certain essential oils that have been shown to be able to activate and wake up the mind. Essential oils like peppermint, like rosemary, helps increase the chances of remembering things that you need to be able to remember, helps improving your focus, helps improve your recall.
Fascinating. And that there's actually science to back that up, which is so crazy. It's just like, our sense of smell, it's one of those things that helps, as Jim is describing, to drive memories deeper and create a stronger connection when we're learning some information. So utilize that channel. That's just an open thing that's happening on automatic anyways. And peppermint, for example, is one of the things that I saw when I was looking into the research. Using essential oil, maybe you can just, right before you get started, maybe you have a few drops of peppermint oil that I don't know, wipe on the book or something. Or
it's often, and it's often what you do before the actual act that really shows up, when you need to perform. And same thing with doing a light workout before studying can help you to retain information better, right? And so anything that's going to be good for your heart is going to be good for your head. So getting that blood flow, the artery that goes directly from the heart to the brain is the carotid artery, right? And it's just like the primary one. And, getting the right amount of oxygen and circulation is very important. So the fourth thing I would actually put is music, what we talked about. So I make that the fourth thing to do after when we're talking about the different sense of smell. Because there's research done at Stanford School of Medicine basically saying that playing certain types of music, such as classical or Baroque, can help students engage the parts of their brain to help them pay attention and better anticipate and make predictions better. Besides the fact that some music will actually enhance people's mood, which would be good, just because all learning is state dependent, and you want to be able to always control your mood and your outlook for things when it comes to study.
You said all learning is state dependent.
Learning is state dependent. It's one of the primary beliefs, that we have, when we talk about Kiwk brain, is like the state of mind and body, the emotion, the feelings. Like, think about it. Back in school, if people were tested on, what was these state capitals, and name these presidents, or name when, this periodic table, or what is all the stuff that we learned back in school. Most people don't remember it for two reasons. Number one is relevancy, right? Relevancy meaning maybe they didn't see a one-to-one connection on why it's important and relevant to their life. Sine, cosine, tangent X, hypotenuse Y, But the other thing is the emotional state people learned it in, the students learned it in. For most people, when you ask them how do they feel mostly when they're sitting in class being lectured to, most people say, I was bored. And that's like on an emotional scale, that's like a 0, right? But anything times 0 equals 0. If information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory, if the emotion level is 0, There's not a lot of recall because that's the first part, the first third of the memory stages is called encoding. And that's how you actually encode the information, put it in, then you store it, and then you retrieve it. But part of the encoding is making, if you want better recall, is to make it more emotional. What do you see? What do you feel? How is it, how's it touching you in a certain way?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? When you said relevancy, it just really sparked up a lot for me because I loathed biology and science. Like, I couldn't stand it. And up until even a few years ago, I'd have these nightmares where I'm in biology class and just like I didn't have my homework or something, or like human anatomy and physiology. And I still remember my teacher. She was a little creepy. And she'd be in my dream, and I'm just like, oh, no, I got to figure this out. And it's because I just really didn't want to be there. I couldn't stand the process. But what created this connection, I love it. Like, it is my life. It's things no one makes me study biology every day, but I'm very passionate about it now because the relevancy, with it applying to my life personally. And that's what we do with the Model Health Show, is how can we connect this information to your life so that you want to learn about it, so that it becomes fun and entertaining and engaging and becomes a part of who you are more easily. And that's really one of the big secrets I want everybody to walk away with, is tying in the things that you want to learn, tie it into something that matters to you, right? Why do you want to learn it? Not just, I should learn it just because, or it's important to learn. You need to consciously create an association to it. And for me, it's teaching. So when I'm learning things, I'm thinking, how can I teach this? How can I make this make sense to other people so that they can have their lives changed? And so that's just one of the big takeaways of the many that we have here today. But I want to make sure that we talk about taking notes, because that just blew my mind when you had us to do those 2 columns way back in the day. You taught us about taking notes. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Right. So one of the ways that can increase your ability to retain the things that you're studying is to take notes. That people don't realize that, there's 80% of what you learn can be gone within 2 days. So you listen to a podcast, you read a book, you go to a lecture, 48 hours later, 80% of it could be gone. And one of the ways to mitigate that from happening is by taking notes. But it's like, how do you take notes? There's all these different ways. And for most people, they didn't really learn a process, or if they did, it was kind of like that linear outline. You remember, Shawn, it was like one Roman numeral, like A and Roman numeral, 1, 2, that kind of thing. And the challenge is, so they've done lots of studies on research to find out one of some of the best ways of taking notes. And so there's qualities to active note taking, because instead of passive note taking, they found the worst way of taking notes actually really surprised them. It was by transcribing what the teacher was saying. That was the worst way of taking notes. And it's kind of interesting, because you would think maybe part of people would think is, hey, wouldn't it help me to take notes by having every single thing word for word? And they found it actually hurt people.
Yeah.
And so first of all, I would say you don't have to go for those transcriptions. A question I always get is about typing notes and handwriting notes. They find the studies show that taking notes by hand is actually better for people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Taking notes by hand is actually better for people. And one of the reasons why is because you could technically type. Somebody could type as fast as somebody could speak, but they can't necessarily. When you're handwriting, you can't write that fast, and it forces you to really qualify information, to filter information, to take notes with purpose, to listen to everything and just write down and hone in on the things that's really important. And that's alone, besides the notes itself, helps to increase your understanding and your effectiveness there. But we would generally want notes that meet this quality. Number one is you want notes that are active, because I did a whole session last time when you and I were talking about how to learn anything faster, and we talked about the FAST method and everything. But the A is being active, because learning is not a spectator sport. You need to be active. The second thing when taking notes is taking notes with purpose. Like you said, relevancy, right? Like you have to know your purpose of what you're looking for. Otherwise, how do you know if you didn't, whether you find it or not? Good note taking is also very organized. And so you have to figure out the best way of organizing information for you. They find that the best way of taking notes actually is in your own words, and not the expert's words, but your own words itself, because it's more personal for you. They also found that taking key ideas and using like images is more effective than just writing everything out. But then how do you take that information and lay it out? Some people are familiar with mind mapping. right? Mind mapping is a creative way of doing left and right brain note taking, where you put the main idea in the middle and then coming out like spokes of a wheel, or maybe like branches of a tree. You see the other areas, and then those branches get broken down and so on and so forth. A very easy way that I like to teach people to take notes on, you mentioned, is drawing a line down the page. And it's so simple, but again, we keep things purposely elegant because anybody can make things more complicated, right? I mean, you want things to be so simple and easy and elegant that we're going to do it on a daily basis. So I put a line down the page. On the left side, I take notes. And so I'm writing down how to remember names and how to learn a language and how to speed read and all those things. But on the right side, I'm not taking notes. I'm actually making notes, which is a slight distinction, but this is what I mean. On the left side, I'm capturing information. On the right side, I'm creating it. Meaning that if I'm going to get distracted and focus somewhere else, I'd rather get distracted on the right side of the page. And on the right side, I'm writing my impressions of what I'm writing on the left side. So it's like, how am I going to use this, or questions that I have, or how am I going to share it with somebody else, or how does it relate to something I already know? So that's the difference between note taking and note making. It's the difference between capturing and actually creating notes, which is just as obviously as effective. And then again, doing it with handwriting instead of digital keyboard, you'll get a nice lift on there. There's a study done at Princeton University that shows that note takers actually retain more information by hand than by hunt and pecking.
Right. And everybody's got the laptops and their, phones to take a little note here or there. But just listening to the expert who actually knows this stuff to, pin this down, it's kind of like when you're writing something, in a way, you're spelling it out, right? You're casting a spell, right? A spell of learning in a way. And like I've got, like I said, all of these notebooks, handwritten notes, just through the years of learning. And today, same thing. I'll take something that I hear that's profound, and I'll write a little note about it. Yeah. And it's in my own words as well. And
I like that.
You said also that, to cater things and find the way that works best for you as far as organization. And I thought about a friend of ours, Julia Roy. And when she comes and she's taking notes, she's got all these different colors and things that color coordinated and just the best looking notes I've ever seen. I was like, that's not my cup of tea, but it was really fascinating to see that's what works for her. And she's one of the most brilliant and intelligent people that I know, and that's the way that she does it. So finding the things that work for you, even if you are taking notes on your laptop, employing these strategies where you can.
And I like that too, because it's just like people's diets and their exercises, finding something that works for people, because whatever gets people to do it is what I like. It's not right or wrong. It's just good, better, best. For individuals. Like they did a study where they took a couple of scientists, they set up an auditorium full of people, and half of them took notes with a keyboard, the other half took notes handwriting while somebody spoke, and they wanted to figure out who would remember the most and who would retain the most. And they found that after they tested people afterwards, that the handwriting people won, hands down. No pun intended. Handwriting people won, hands down. Because people understood more, they retained more, they remembered more, when they wrote by hand. So I would explore with everybody. I know if it's not something that's new, sometimes you have to take a step backwards to take a couple leaps forward. But again, it might be individual for everybody.
All right, right now I'm going to teach you some strategies to help you to improve your reading speed and also your comprehension, and also do things like remember people's names. Have you ever been in a situation where you shake hands, you meet somebody, and then like literally just their name goes in one ear and out the other? So I'm going to teach you some strategies that I actually learned from Kiwk that I use all the time. Now, a really simplistic way to look at learning is taking something that you don't know and connecting it with something that you do know. That in and of itself creates this melding process, this neural association in your brain. So for example, if you're meeting someone new, and we'll say that this person's name is Bob. And of course, it sounds like a pretty easy name to remember, but for a lot of folks, it can go in one ear and out the other, especially if you're meeting a bunch of people at one time, for example. Hey, Bob, this is Bob, this is Mary, and this is Marcus. And you'll be like, oh, hi, Bob. Hi. But then you'll forget their names almost instantaneously. Here's how you can remember their names and literally just lock it in that moment and potentially never forget. And so, for example, there's something that you might know maybe from your childhood. If you think about something like bobbing for apples, right? Bobbing for apples, it has the name Bob in it. So when you meet Bob, what I would do is picture Bob bobbing for apples in my head. All right. Bob doesn't know that I'm doing this. It's not anything weird or freaky. I mean, you could make it freaky. Maybe he's dressing a little bit risque, but and this also is bringing more humor or animation to something, makes it even stronger in your mind, makes it much more difficult to forget if you connect something memorable to it. So I'll meet Bob, shake his hand, think about Bob bobbing for apples. So I meet Bob and I'm shaking his hand and I'm thinking about him bobbing for apples, maybe in his fanciest sequence underwear or whatever it is, boxer shorts. All right, so we got Bob bobbing for apples. Then I meet Mary, and when I shake Mary's hands, I think about the name Mary. Where would I see that? Where's something I can recollect from my memory, from my experience, that resonates with the name Mary? And it could be getting married, right? So I'll shake Mary's hand and I'll think about Mary standing there at the altar, waiting for her groom or her lover for life to tie the knot. And then the next person would be Marcus. And I'm just spitballing here, but Marcus, if you have a name like Marcus, for example, you could break that down. You could think about Marcus, it has Mark in it, and I'll think about marker. And maybe Mark is using a marker and writing us on a dry erase board or something like that, right? So we got Mark using a marker and writing us, and I'll remember Marcus. Mary is getting married, Bob bobbing for apples, all right? So using imagery and taking something that you know and connecting it with something that you don't know, which is their names, immediately starts to meld those things together in your mind. So that's one of the strategies to help you to remember names. So you could use animated things like that. You can tie it to, so for example, a good example that I have would be meeting my neighbors. All right. I'm probably the only person in my block that I know everybody's name. And I'm not like the neighbor guy. I'm not like Mr. Rogers out here. All right. But, just in passing, you'll meet some people. And one of my neighbors, for example, her name is Erin. And so when I met her, I thought, okay, how is it spelled? Right. So immediately when I heard it, I thought of like the male version of Aaron, Aaron, right? And I thought about Aaron Rodgers. And so I was just like, immediately I pictured her in Green Bay Packers, shoulder pads, and she's out here throwing the rock. I'll never forget Aaron's name, all right? So that was Aaron. There's another older fella who I see all the time out walking his dog, Stan, all right? And Stan, I thought about a character from the old Martin Lawrence TV show, Martin, and Stan was his boss at the radio station. So whenever I see Stan, I think about Stan from Martin. All right, they don't know I'm doing this, but I know their names. They're locked in. Another one of my neighbors' names is Troy, right? So Troy, when I met him, I thought about Brad Pitt in Troy, right? So I'm picturing my guy, he's got the armor on, muscles beaming, and I just locked that in. So a lot of folks would probably be it means something when you remember somebody's name. It just does. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience of somebody messing your name up or calling you something else. I mean, you don't have to take these things so seriously, but for some people, it can be a big mistake, like in business or friendships. It can really throw you off if somebody if they feel like you don't even appreciate or respect them enough to learn their name. All right, so this can be a valuable skill in building relationships in business and in life in general. So that's why these specific things work. So I hope that helps you and gives you a tool so I can go around the table and meet 10 people and I can remember all of their names, right? And I've done it many times, and I learned this strategy from the remarkable Jim Kiwk. And another invaluable thing that I learned from Jim was increasing my reading speed. And one of the things that he mentioned in the past segment was using a visual pacer. So this could be as you're going across the words on the page using your finger, but I like, and so does he, using a marker or a pen or a highlighter, using something and tracing across the bottom of the words as you're reading. What that does is it instantaneously increases your reading speed by about 25%. Now, the reason that we don't typically do this or utilize this skill, this very powerful brain association, it's a brain hack, is because when we're in conventional education, this is frowned upon to use your finger. A lot of kids naturally will use their finger to read, getting started, and will, shoo away that hand, because you don't want to be that person who's using their hand or a visual pacer to read. And so utilizing this consciously now can unlock some mental superpowers, because the human brain, we're hardwired to keep our eye on movement. The thing about the words on the page is that they're static. So having something moving is just instantly clocking in with one of the primitive associations that the human brain has to watch for movement. All right. And also another piece within that, because even still, you're still only going to be able to go through the words as fast as you can say them aloud in your head. All right. You can only read if you're using typical reading strategies, you can only read as fast as you can vocalize the words in your head. All right. What that is called sub-vocalization. And that limits us on how quickly we can read, because we're forcefully, unknowingly enunciating every single word as we go along when we're reading typically. But what we've got to do, if we really want to increase our reading speed even more past speaking really quickly or speaking really quickly in our head, and I think about the Micro Machine guy. I think about Twister. Shout out to Twister, repping Chicago. Busta Rhymes, people that can speak really, really quickly. But for the average person, they're not going to be speaking that quickly, even in their head. So we've got to train ourselves out a little bit of sub-vocalization, because we're limiting the actual capacity of our brain. Our brain we don't have to sound a word out in order to recognize the word. The brain, when it sees the word cat, you don't have to sound it out in your head. It's already cognitively connected. And so when you see that word, the brain is already is locked in on what that is. But we slow ourselves down when we read the word out loud. All right. So we'll just use a longer word, not just cat, but like hippopotamus, hippopotamus. All right. So by using a visual pacer and moving faster than you can enunciate those words, what happens is it forces you to stop vocalizing them. And eventually, at first it's going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel like you're missing a lot of stuff. But eventually, your comprehension starts to go up pretty dramatically, because your brain is going to start to adapt to this new strategy of not sounding out every word and recognizing the word and picking up the data. All right. So reducing sub-vocalization. And some folks try to eliminate it totally. Now, for me, I'm thinking about things in terms of there isn't this one size fits all thing. And the same thing for me, I'm looking at it as far as training. There's so many different types of training and exercise for the body. I feel that there can be different types of training and exercise for the brain. So when I'm really like in research mode and reviewing books that might have, very technical data and things like that I don't need to like really harp over or get invested in the story, then I'll utilize more of a speed reading strategy. But sometimes, like, for example, if you're just wanting to unwind and hang out in the evening, relax to a good book, you don't have to dart your way through your John Grisham or J.K. Rowling's book. All right, you could take the time and read it at a relaxed pace. All right, so I'm not an all or nothing type of guy or type of thinker in this domain. I just believe that we should have access to these tools and know that they exist, and know that our brains are far more capable at adapting to different inputs than we give it credit for. And it's just because, again, we're not taught how to learn. We're often just force-fed what to learn. And so this can expand our palette so much, and being able to learn different things that are often not given to us in our conventional education. So there's a couple of insights there. So we've got some strategies to help us to remember names, to improve our reading speed. And also, I wanted to share one more insight with you, because in the information age, the accessibility is really the big difference. This is the thing that we're experiencing more than ever, that we don't really realize. Right at our fingertips at all times is like infinite amount of data and accessibility to said data and the data's accessibility to you and other people's accessibility to you. All right. I grew up during a time when all you had was a home phone and computers were not in every household. And so if you left the house to go somewhere, you're just gone. That's it. I'll see you later. Today, however, constant 24/7 access to you should you allow it. Everywhere you go, everybody that you know who has your number has access to you, right? So we've got so much influx potential coming at us. And also our brains get hardwired to seek out and look for more of these information because of the way that social media sites in particular are wired up to keep us coming back for more, searching for the likes, searching for the engagement, and seeing what the conversations are, seeing what all the stuff that's going on out there. There's this deep-seated FOMO, fear of missing out, that's taking place. And so having access to our phones is kind of like having a slot machine in our pocket. And if we're wanting to really make a difference in the world, to accomplish things, to have deep focus, creative work and productivity, we've got to have a better association with our smartphones, because in many ways our smartphones are making us dumb. All right. Ironically, and it's not that these things aren't valuable, immensely valuable, but unfortunately today, many people don't realize that our phones are controlling our lives. And so what we want to do is understand that this is happening, because maybe you are wanting to create, work on a book or an article or create a piece of art or whatever the case might be, study for an exam, put a presentation together, but your phone is right by you and you find yourself engaging in these just checks, right? I'm supposed to be focused, creating, getting done what I've got to get done, but I'll just check Instagram really quickly. I'll just check Twitter really quickly. I'll just check. And you know this, when you just check, you can get sucked right into that internet black hole before you know it. And 20 minutes might pass by. And the problem, as Jim has articulated as well, is that when you are being distracted by your phone, it takes time. There's a switching cost. It's called a switching cost of you doing that thing and then trying to switch back to the thing that you're supposed to be doing, right? This multitasking is really a misnomer. The human brain is not really wired up to do that. It can switch tasks quickly, but there's still a task switching that's taking place. There might be a faster switchover or a shorter lull for some people in some brains, for sure. And truth be told, women tend to have a shorter lull in switching from task to task. All right. The female brain is different from the male brain. All right. There are some remarkable differences. However, this does not give us a permission slip to engage in what we believe to be multitasking, which what it really does is it makes us less efficient in everything that we're doing. All right. So to be able to utilize our capacity to get stuff done, one of the strategies, since we know that that phone is a portal that makes us leave reality, I want you to really hear what I'm saying right now. When you pick up your phone and you go into that app, you're no longer here. You're in there. You've left. All right. And you feel all the feelings. You get into that world and you're no longer present. And there's even a delay oftentimes, especially if you're on your phone for a while, there's a delay in you picking up reality again. And so what is the solution here? Well, for example, I've had the opportunity and great fortune, and it's a labor of love, to say the least. It takes you through a lot of growth, a lot of efforting, but to write 2 pretty epic books and to be able to accomplish something like that at a time like today, I had to put parameters in my life, specifically with that damn phone. I had to keep it away from me while I'm doing my deep work. So one of the strategies for me that I still use to this day, when I walk into my office to work, to write, to create, whatever it is that I'm doing, researching to put this episode together, I walk into the office, phone goes across the room. I sit my phone across the room. So it's not in arm's reach where I can just grab it and just check. If I'm going to just check, I literally have to stop what I'm doing, walk across the room and pick it up. It's more time for my brain to be like, no, what are you doing? Stop it. What are you doing? Where are you going? get back to what you need to do. All right. Now, again, if it's within arm's reach, what you do is, I'm just going to check the time. Boom. You check the time. You see somebody text you, right? Or whatever the case might be. And then next thing you know, you're getting pulled out of your work. And there's a 99.9% chance that that text is not urgent, but it's just because you see it, right? Now, if your work requires that there's constant access, absolutely keep those channels open for sure. But those things that are not necessary, let's remove or dramatically limit those things. So, for example, I highly, highly recommend that you shut off all the notifications for things that are unnecessary. Because when you sign up for the app, they ask you, would you like us to send you some notifications, right? For Instagram, for Twitter, for Facebook, for YouTube. And next thing you know, a lot of folks are getting these notifications constantly when people are commenting or whatever the case might be on their stuff. You don't need that. It's a constant distraction, and it's training your brain to be distracted. All right. Shut those notifications off. And the thing is, these social media tech companies, they are well versed. They want to get you in and keep you in. Hopefully you've seen the film Social Dilemmas, kind of articulating this in a more visual way. You know, a lot of folks are getting educated through film today, through television documentaries. That's all good. But there's a much bigger story as well. And just understanding that this is taking place, they're using psychological tactics to get you in the app and keep you there as long as possible. And they're making money, whether you're buying stuff or not. Something is eventually, is highly likely, there's going to be an engagement that takes place that adds money to their pockets. All right. So there's a vested interest in keeping you on those apps. And so what happens now is, you know, when I download the app, you know, would you like to turn on notifications? No. But they'll ask me every so often, the little thing will pop up, a little message. Hey, turn on notifications for Instagram or whatever the case might be. They're very persistent at asking you over time, right? They'll keep on asking. You got to keep saying no. All right. So turn off the excessive notifications. We do not need them unless it is required for your work. If you're somebody who's an Instagram specialist for, your said company, and that's what you do, cool. But if you work at a lab, or you're a third grade teacher, or you're a police officer, you don't need everybody who comments on your Instagram post to come to your phone. We don't need that. We don't need it. Turn off the notifications that are unnecessary. All right. And also, one more tip here is understanding where your prime time is. So what do I mean by that? Your prime time of productivity, of creativity, of get up and go, accomplish things. You want to leverage that so that you can build the life that you want. And what tends to happen is we will unknowingly outsource our prime time to other people's needs, right? So maybe your prime time is first thing in the morning, and you got goals. You're like, I'm going to get up, I'm going to write, one chapter of my book today. I'm going to write 10 pages today, or I'm going to fill in the blank. I'm going to work on this new program that I've been wanting to create for my students. And then you go to your phone and, you see there's some emails, and then you dive into the emails, right? You're starting the day with other people's agendas, right? Instead of handling your business first. Because the thing is, do you need to do that first thing? Is that email the priority? Is it essential that you do that at 5 a.m. versus when you clock in at 8 a.m. or whatever the case might be? Utilize your prime time. Stop outsourcing it to others. So what that might mean is maybe we don't go to our phone first thing in the morning, right? So maybe you give yourself 30 minutes of just me time without picking up your phone. And I know some people right now, they're like, Shawn, but it's my alarm. That's what I use for my alarm. If you've got a problem with the phone where you pick up your phone in the bed and then you just get on that bad boy, you get to scrolling, listen, we might need an intervention, okay? This would be an ideal opportunity. I'm just going to throw this out there. No judgment. I'm hella judging right now. No, I'm just kidding. No judgment. No judgment. This might be an opportunity for you to get a real alarm clock, okay? They still exist. I promise you. I actually just saw my alarm clock. This true story, it was actually behind a curtain in our bedroom. Like I didn't even know where it was. because, I've created this routine to where I'm getting up before the alarm goes off, right? So the alarm for me, yeah, I actually do have it on my phone, but it's in another room, like it's in the bathroom. And so I got to actually get up and go to it. But, to be honest, 9 out of 10 times, more than that, I'm up before the alarm. And oftentimes I don't need the alarm. I don't even turn it on because I have my day kind of managed to where I have a buffer. And so there's many ways of going about this, because that's another thing. It could be difficult for you to get out of bed in the morning because you got your phone right there. You could just hit the snooze and you're not getting up and getting after your day. And we get mistaken that we're getting a few minutes extra sleep, but it is really chitty sleep, all right? Chitty sleep, when we're falling back from getting shaken up by an alarm, drifting back in for a couple extra minutes of low quality sleep, and then getting ourselves to the place where we have to rush. That's no way to start a day, all right? And I know we've all done it before, but we can hack our environment and our brain so that we're no longer subscribing to those behaviors, right? So put your alarm across the room to where you actually got to get up if you do, in fact, need an alarm. All right, so take control of your morning. I know people that literally they put their phone in their car in the evening because they already know who they are. If it's around, they're gonna dabble. All right, so create some space between you and the distraction, the infinite distraction that is our smartphones. All right, not that we can't utilize them to great reward and benefit. And there are many people right now, we're listening on a smartphone right now, and it's beautiful. But you put that in at your own time, on your own schedule, rather than it controlling you.
Like our life right now is a reflection of our thinking, because how we think determines what we focus on. It determines how we feel. It determines what we do. And right. So really the sum of our thinking really reflects our day-to-day life, in our relationships, in our health, in our habits, in our career. I always thought it was interesting back in school, they teach you more what to think, but not how to think.
Right.
And I think that's one of the big challenges in a world where everything is being outsourced overseas, jobs, right? Or it's being automated. There's software that could do a lot of, left brain jobs, or there's something like artificial intelligence. What do we have as human beings? What makes us human and makes us valuable in life, in the workplace? And I think it's our ability to think, our ability to solve problems, our ability to make really good decisions. Right. But I think it's one of those things people take for granted because we're not just conscious of our thinking. They say we have an average of 60,000 thoughts a day. The challenge is 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we had yesterday and the day before that. Mm-hmm. So how do we create growth? How do we stretch ourselves to new levels? And so I love this because I feel like you make one little distinction in the way you think differently. And there's a Oliver Wendell Holmes quote that says, a man's, mind once stretched by a new idea never regains its original dimensions. Mm-hmm. And so I want people to be able to think in a way that makes them more productive, allows them to perform better, allows them also greater peace of mind. Yeah. Because in this world we've had this conversation in past episodes about digital distraction and digital depression and digital overload. It's weighing on people's health. This world where people are comparing themselves to other people on social media world, where they're comparing themselves to this highly filtered life of, highlight reel of everyone else's life. But that all comes down to our ability to think, the ability to think for ourselves, to produce new results.
That's so powerful, man, because thinking is everything, really. It's and I've said this before, our perception is our reality. And that all has to do with what we're thinking and how we're thinking about ourself in relation to our environment, ourself in relation to ourself.
Yeah.
And so I think it's of the utmost importance for us to really understand our thinking a little bit more. And that's why I'm really happy to have you on today. But also, how can we optimize our thinking? So one of the first things I want to ask you about has to do with decision making, because that's a big component of our thinking that has a huge impact on the results we get in our lives. So what are some of the new insights, some of the things you've been coming across lately in teaching in regards to decision making? Yeah,
I can't think exactly that our life is a reflection of all the decisions, the sum total of all the decisions we made to this point. Where we're going to live, what we're going to do, who we're going to be with and such. And so these daily decisions, a lot of people are suffering from decision fatigue. You know this, and it's a big health concern. It's just people are wasting their mental energy on decisions that really don't matter in their life. And really, I think it comes down to, I tweeted this a few years ago. I said, the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. The most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing, because people are getting really good at things that don't really matter, or they're using their decisions on things that really don't matter. We've had this conversation in the past about some leaders who are wearing the same outfit pretty much every day because they don't want to waste one of their good decisions. They buy 10 of those shirts so they don't have to think about, or meal prep, and they don't want to be able to waste that. But I did a podcast recently and I called it How to Work Smart versus Working Hard. And everyone always says, yes, of course I want to work smarter and not harder. I filmed it actually in a power plant, an actual power plant. And I opened it with this story that basically said this: one day, this really busy power plant just shuts down out of nowhere, and it's dead silent. And the employees are running around with their head cut off, not knowing what to do. The operations manager, after hours, doesn't know what to do. Nobody could solve the problem. So the operations manager picks up the phone, calls a local technician, and luckily the technician was in the area. And he says, "You got to help me. We're losing all this business. Time is money. We're going to shut down. Please save us." He was like, technician's like, "You're lucky. I'm right around the corner." He shows up and he walks around the power plant. And he goes to one beam. Now, this power plant is full of different beams, right? And on those beams have all these different electrical boxes. And he goes to one specific electrical box, and he takes out a marker and he puts a big X on it. And he opens up the box, and inside, as you would expect, there are bolts, there are wires, there are screws. Out of all of that, he goes to one specific screw. He turns it not a quarter of an inch, and then bam, the entire power plant lights up. And the technician's like, "Thank you so much. You saved the day. You saved our business. How much do I owe you?" And the technician looks at him and he says, "That will be $10,000. And then the operations manager was like, "You must be crazy. You were here for 5 minutes. All you did was turn one screw. Any of us could have turned that screw." He's like, "Give me an itemized bill." And he's like, "No problem." Technician reaches in his back pocket, takes out his notebook, scribbles on it for a second, tears out the page, gives it to the operations manager. The operations manager looks at it and says, "I understand." He goes to his desk, takes out his checkbook, writes a check for $10,000, hands it to the man. And you zoom in on that bill and it says this: turning screw, $1. Knowing what screw to turn, $9,999. And my message to everybody who's listening is not that you have a screw loose. It's two things. Number one, we live in the knowledge economy where knowledge is not only power, it's profit, right? Specialized knowledge. That's why I love your show. And I learned so much because it's not just the have and the have-nots. It's those who know and those who don't know, right? And those who know wellness and optimization and human performance, and those who just don't know better. And so there's that gap. And that's why I dedicate my life to accelerated learning. But the other reason I tell this story is not only so you could be an expert at what you do, is that there are usually one or two screws. There's one beam, there's one box, one or two screws that really are what I call a focal point. A focal point. It's one or two things. They call it, other people have called it a lead domino, right? One of the first early dominoes you hit and it knocks down other things. In military, they call it a forced multiplier, meaning that for the same amount of input, you get multiple outputs or multiple rewards. So my life, based on, my learning difficulties that I had growing up from my head injury, my sleep issues, which you've helped me a lot with, those deficits has created really a big drive in me wanting to get the most out of the energy that I have. When we're talking about resources, like going back to MacGyver, he has very little resources, but he has a lot of internal resourcefulness. And I feel like every single person listening to this has a lot of internal resourcefulness. It's things that might not be on an asset sheet, but are things like your creativity, your decision making, your ability to solve problems, your ability to meta-think, think about your thinking, your self-awareness. And that's really the owner's manual. And so when it comes to decision making, I'm really excited about this because, again, if you could just think about some of the bad decisions we've made in our life and the cost that it's had for us. I'm a big proponent on, we've had this conversation about mistakes, and a lot of people, as we grow older, we're afraid of making mistakes, and we're not making decisions. And even, I would say, not like failing to make a decision is also a decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
this,
sure.
like when people have a decision about what to eat or not, they go into default mode. They're still making a decision. So I feel like part of it is decision is it's a fitness. So you want to build your decision making muscles, because a lot of people are so lackadaisical, over like what's important to them. So they don't really build those muscles. So they don't have that strength, if you will. But then there's also strategies besides fitness, just like in past episodes, we've talked about memory fitness, and how even if you don't use a strategy like on how to remember names, you could still remember names because your brain is fitter, it's stronger, it's more energized, it's stronger, just like your physical muscles. You could also do that with your thinking muscles. And so there's strategies also. So for example, one of my favorite one is it's classic. It's called 6 Thinking Hats, and it's a great model because I feel like a lot of people aren't able to solve a problem or make a new, better decision because they're stuck from one point of view. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you wonder why somebody maybe dates the same person, or they make the same mistake financially in a business. They hire the same people, or maybe they do the same problem with their diet. And they always fall in the same pattern. It's because we never really get out of our own way and see things from another point of view. One of the reasons why I love podcasts or reading books is you get to see something from an author or an expert's point of view, and it gives you another perspective. And in order to change your perspective, I remember we did that event that you spoke at, along with, like a luminous, group of individuals, your peers. And we had Quincy Jones was one of them.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, getting perspective, that you have to, 2 ways of changing your perspective is changing your place or changing the people you spend time with. Because we know that who you spend time with is who you become. Because a good way of making better decisions is spend time with people who make good decisions, because this from your nervous system and neuroscience. You have mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are your, simplify it, there are your imitation neurons. The reason why is not just your biological networks or your neurological networks, it's your social networks. Because they say if you spend time with 9 broke people, you're going to be the 10th. And it's because you're constantly imitating people around you, and not just their behavior. You're imitating also, you're adopting their beliefs, you're adopting their values, you're adopting their habits, right? And we know from habits, first you create your habits, and then your habits create you.
Right.
And it's not just your habits of meditation and movement and journaling. Those are important, but really those are on the physical plane, if you will, but it's also the internal changes that are going on inside. Because when you're constantly doing something and you show up for it, as you've heard this phrase, as you do anything is how you do everything, right? You start the habit of, I'm somebody who follows through. Like that's an identity level. I mean, that's really deep, because you change. One of the most powerful ways to make a transformation stick is to change how you look at yourself. They say that the 2 most powerful words in the English language are I am, right? Because whatever you put after that determines your destiny, or your destination in your life. And so one of the ways of changing your identity is by having these habits, because it's like you show up.
Yeah.
You show up, and when you show up constantly, all of a sudden you start looking at yourself different, and that's really powerful, to look at yourself as somebody who shows up, in life, because that will ripple into all your different behaviors. But going back to the 6 Thinking Hats, this is a way of changing your perspective, meaning a lot of people don't make new decisions because they're stuck in one mode. And so the summary of it, it was created by Edward de Bono, and he metaphorically created 6 color hats. And then when you imagine, and we know imagination is more powerful than knowledge, you imagine yourself putting on this color hat, you have to look at this decision or this problem through that lens. So for example, let's take the white hat. When somebody puts on a white hat, metaphorically, and I'll give you some memory aids because I'm the memory guy. White is, imagine like a doctor's uniform, right, or a scientist is in white, that reminds you of logic. So let's say I want everybody right now, we'll make this interactive, to think about a decision that you're struggling with, or think about a problem that you need to solve. And I think everybody has one of those things, right? Going back to Quincy Jones, remember on stage, I was asking him like about the problems he had, not just the successes, but the problems. He was like, Jim, I don't have any problems. He was like, I have puzzles. And that's a different way of talking about thinking, a different way of thinking about something. Because for me, when I think about problems, I'm like, oh, something I have to deal with. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle this. But puzzles like fun. Yeah. Puzzles have a solution. So it's a different way of thinking because the words change the way we think also. But going back to this, when you you think about a problem or decision you have right now, imagine yourself putting on the white hat and actually physically like grab something in front of you and put it on so you have your kinesthetic, your muscles in it. And you have to look at the problem or the decision just based on facts and logic. All right. So that's the only way. And that's great for individuals because some people they're not used to doing it. But when they have that hat on, it forces you to look through that perspective.
Right. To be honest with yourself. And
exactly.
Because I think a lot of times we're lying to ourselves on how complicated or difficult it might be.
Right.
And so actually using logic can really help to get rid of some
that's
of the
like
mystery.
that's like your Spock hat, for people who follow Star Trek. You have to look at the issue completely logically and more science-based. Now, another color hat.
Data. Shout out to Data.
Yeah, there you go. Next generation.
By the way, that guy was born to play that role.
Oh my God, Brent. Oh yeah, completely. So you have to look at it analytically. And even if you don't feel like that's you play it, make it a game. And we've said this, you and I have said this before, that it's not that you stopped playing because you grew older. You grew older because you stopped playing. Yeah. And so this is a thinking exercise, a thought experiment, if you will, because this is an episode all about maximizing your thinking. That's what Einstein used to do. Yeah. Einstein used to do these, what he called thought experiments, these imagination experiments. And this is what we're doing right now. So you put on the white hat, and then you have to look at it through logic. You take off the white hat. Now I want you to put on the red hat. So imagine yourself reaching out in front of you, putting on the red hat, and the red hat represents as a mnemonic device. Red is emotion. Red is heart. So I want you to think about now, how does this make you feel? So this gives you permission, because some people look at everything logically, but they don't go with their feelings, right? And that we know that's a superpower also as well.
Absolutely.
So think about this problem that you have. Maybe it's somebody you need to hire. Maybe it's somebody in a relationship, whether or not you want to enter a relationship, or maybe exit a relationship. Maybe it's something you have to do with your health. Think about it now from an emotional standpoint. So you're wearing the red hat.
And by the way, some folks ignore that part.
Exactly.
They're just more bent on logic.
Yeah, right.
And not being honest about how do I feel about this, or even just asking ourselves, how do I feel about this situation?
Exactly. And then when we're talking about being a better thinker, this gives you more perspective. This gives you a spectrum, or a rainbow, if you will, points of view. So you can see something. We've heard of the elephant, right? Where there's an elephant there, and you have these blind monks, and they're reaching out, and they can't see, but they just feel. And one of them's feeling like the tail and thinks the elephant is a snake. And one of them is feeling like the leg of the elephant thinks it's a tree, right? Everyone sees different parts or feels different parts, but they don't see the whole. And through this exercise, you get to see it from these different points of views. So what are other different color hats? Take off the red hat, and now what you're going to do is you're going to put on the black hat. So you put on the black hat. Now, a mnemonic device, the black hat is the critic. All right, so what I want you to think about for a memory aid from your memory coach is imagine a judge in black robes, right? That's the one that's going to judge, right? So now I want you to look at this and think about what could go wrong here. You can meta yourself and be the critic here, give yourself, but some people live with the black hat and they're just critical about everything. Right. You know what I mean? But it makes sense because that's how they were raised, through
and it can
nurture.
be valuable.
Exactly. And it could save you from making mistakes and everything, but you don't see the whole picture. And so the black hat, when you put that on, look at this problem or this decision and think about it like, what could go wrong here? And that, think about your plan B and such. Any negative consequences. Take off the black hat, and now what you're going to do is you're going to put on the yellow hat. Now the yellow hat is the opposite of the black hat. Yellow is like the sun. it's opportunity. So what could go right here? So that's the more of the, if the black is more the critic, the yellow is more the opportunistic, like more of the this is like what are the benefits that could come out of making a decision?
Scenario,
exactly.
the
And
outcome you want.
now some people live with the yellow hat, you know, like a lot of entrepreneurs do this, and they just look at, the rosy side of everything, and they only see that, and then they wonder why, you know, they don't look at the risk, they don't look at the threats, they don't look at the weaknesses or the competition or anything that could go wrong. They just move towards anything that's pleasurable, and that's not necessarily good either. So we went through this. We go through the red, we went through the white, we went through the red, we went through the black, and then the yellow. The green hat is the growth hat. So this is where you need to make a decision or solve a problem. And when you put on the green hat, green is like growth. It's like plant life. It's like growing grass, right? And so this is where you're thinking out of the box. This is the hat you wear, where it's like, what could be an out of the box, new, something we're not even thinking about solution to this whole thing, a different way of looking at it. So green is growth. And then finally, the last hat is the blue hat. And I say the blue for last because the blue is kind of like the manager of all the other hats. It listens to all the other perspectives. The one with the black hat, the white hat, the yellow hat, the red hat, the green hat. And blue is like the sky. It oversees everything else. And so it listens to everything, and then it makes the decision because it heard all the different points of view, could weigh it from different perspectives, and then that's your answer, if you will. And so this is kind of a fun strategy, and I would really encourage everyone who's listening, not just, you know this, knowledge is not power. We've talked about this. All the podcasts and the online programs and the coaching and the seminars, they don't work unless you work. So what I would challenge everybody who's listening to do is maybe take a screenshot of this episode, post it, tag both of us, and share with us a decision that you applied this to, because then you really get to feel it and see how it works in your life. But I've been sharing this for about 20 years. And again, I didn't create this actual model. It's Edward de Bono. But I've heard so many great testimonials from people and great, amazing stories about their relationship, about their health, about big decisions they had to make, about where they're going to live and their career. And it makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
So you're not stuck in one point of view.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say, because we tend to get stuck in our way of thinking. And we have access to so many different ways of thinking, like inherently in us.
Right.
And so it's just first of all, just giving permission, like you just did, to think differently. And here's how you do it, put on this hat and look at this situation. And so for myself personally, I just want to share this. I had started to get more into this kind of fact-based thinking, about certain decisions in my life. And that's a big part of my natural approach, but there's also the big feeling part. And I started to lessen the feeling part. And so I was going on more of things of, these are things that I should do, logically speaking. Right. But they didn't feel right. And lo and behold, when I keep taking steps in that direction, it just didn't work out right, because I wasn't acknowledging, like, literally your feelings oftentimes will give you direct feedback.
Right.
But you cannot just get caught up in your feelings, because feelings can be very temporary.
Of course.
So I love this kind of whole brain, whole being thinking. And man, thank you so much for sharing that. That's just like blowing my mind right now.
Absolutely, Shawn. I would encourage also, when everyone's listening to this doesn't have to just apply to your life. This works really well for teams. So let's say, your business, let's say you're a small business entrepreneur, you have a small group of 5 individuals on your team, and you're facing something that's an issue in your industry or something internally, like, should you do this product, or should you, stop doing this show, or whatever you need to do is get everybody in a room and then take turns wearing these different hats. This is also great for parents to teach their children at an early age, because it builds empathy. It allows you to, even if I've had parents actually make out of different color pieces of paper, like these actual hats, and they'll take their children through these exercises. Children will have a question about school, they'll have a question about, going to whatever their decision is, and then you could play with this with them also as well. So it's not just your own benefit. You could do this with your team, your family, and more.
This is something super valuable for ourselves to practice, but also to teach and instill in other folks this concept of divergent thinking and being able to really, quote, think outside of the box and just look at things from all these different perspectives. It's so interesting how many creative solutions there are to the same problem. But when we're in it, we can think that there's this problem and I don't know how to solve it. When there are like hundreds of different solutions for it, but we have to be divergent in it. So, man, I love that so much.
And it's an incredibly valuable skill to have right now when we're talking about skill-based success, meaning that when we talked about a lot of jobs are going overseas, or AI is going to replace them, or automation is. The three areas that computers aren't as easily going to be able to do that is three areas: creativity, right, which is a thinking process; imagination, right, because think about the entertainment industry, think about all these wonderful superhero movies you and I geek out about, that comes from somebody's imagination. And then the third thing a computer is not going to be able to do as well as a human, at least not yet, is strategy. And so be able to make these kind of good decisions and solve problems. That's our value in society. An entrepreneur is nothing but a professional problem solver, right? They're taking challenges, whether they're small life challenges or grand, big challenges that are going on, that the planet is facing right now.
Yeah. I love this 6 hats. And I also love what you shared. And it's just like still blowing my mind right now. If you want to start making better decisions, get yourself around people making good decisions, because we are inherently, we just are. We become our environment.
Yeah.
So if you know somebody in your life who has a tendency to make good decisions, be around that person more often. Those mirror neurons can do their work. And what you said earlier, as soon as you mentioned some really highly successful folks taking a decision off the table, because we do get this decision fatigue. Like at the end of the day, after you've done a lot of stuff, you just don't care. You know, it's like, whatever, what do you want for dinner? Whatever, right? And having them wear the same thing every day, like somebody's coming with that approach. I think I saw Dr. Dre did that he's got a great documentary, The Defiant Ones. He's got like these, I think they're white Air Force Ones he wears every day, but he's kind of frivolous. So he has like a new pair every day and like the same outfit. And it's just kind of weird. And the same thing with some other folks as well. But that also made me think about Kingpin as well. I'm just saying, it might be a little psychotic, but hey, they're winning, right. So let's just be real about it.
You have all the superheroes. Batman wears the same outfit, right. As Spider-Man. I wear this brain shirt pretty much every day.
Well, at least I would hope you got a couple of them.
Yeah, man. I do.
So we talked a little bit about decisions and becoming a better problem solver, which just blew my mind with that. Let's talk about, because one of the things that tends to happen, we make decisions and we might make a bad decision.
Right.
Or something that we feel is a bad decision, something that's cost us. What can we do to recover? Is there anything that you know about that can help us to recover from making mistakes?
Absolutely. And so when we're talking about mistakes, I think a lot of people don't make progress in their life because of the fear of judgment, the fear of looking bad. A lot of people won't go to that exercise at the gym because they're brand new. And I think that's something that's very important to get over. And I'll talk about first, a lot of people won't make mistakes to begin with, but mistakes are just a sign that we're trying something, right? It's similar to a child who's learning how to walk. You wouldn't see your child stumble a few times and just be like, okay, don't try this anymore. You're looking really bad. Don't walk. Walking's not for you. But as we grow older, sometimes we're so concerned about other people's opinions and expectations. So I know a lot of your listeners take notes. I would write this down and just put it by your computer or something. It's just, you can go broke buying into the opinions and expectations of other people. And when I was working, I help a lot of actors speed read scripts, have focus on set, memorize their lines faster. And I remember when I was working with Jim Carrey, and we were making guacamole, of all things, in his kitchen, which is a great brain food. By the way, what you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. So we're making this, and I'm asking him the same question I ask a lot of people, like, why do you do what you do? I'm very interested in human motivation because that's a thinking process. And I find out that the reason why he acts so insane, if you will, or extreme on set is because he wants to give everybody who's watching permission to be themselves. And I feel like, and he calls it freeing people from the concern of others. That's quote unquote his religion, freeing other people from the concern of other people. Yeah. And I feel like constantly we're mitigating ourselves, our way we can express ourselves, because we're scared of how we're going to look. We're scared of, of judgment, and what critics are going to say. But the critics, that's the easiest job in the world, because all they do is they don't have to do anything. They can just criticize other people who are trying to do things. Right. So my first comment on when it comes to mistakes is, you've all heard this before, but in order to learn, you have to make mistakes. That's how we learn, because there's no such thing as failure. People think failure is the opposite of success. But I feel like, in you and I, the people that we get to spend time with and we get to interview for our shows and such, and our personal experience, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success, right? And I feel like there's no such thing as failure. There's only failure to learn, because if you're getting feedback, then you know what to do different. And I just did a podcast episode with Beth Comstock, who's the former vice chair of General Electric, which is all about imagination. And she has a new book called Imagine It Forward, and the Power of Imagination. And we're talking about, Edison, who started General Electric, and he was a great marketer. But obviously, you've all heard that he was like, I didn't fail thousands of times to make the light bulb. I succeeded in learning what not to do, right? And so it's a mindset. So I would say first start with making more mistakes and fail forward, and give yourself permission. But the big thing is, how do you recover from a mistake? And I would give everyone, I like acronyms, this, because we've talked about this in other shows on how to remember names and speed read. I use acronyms. What I would say is, put the mistake behind you and make it old. And so the acronym is OLD. I want everyone to think about a mistake that they are holding on to, because I think a lot of us have regret and they live in the past. But I always tell people, if you're living in the past, then you're dying in the present. Because you're always looking in that rear view mirror, and then you can't be here, right? And so you can learn from the past, but you got to live for today, and then you could lead your legacy tomorrow. And so remember old. And so the O in someone, as everyone right now, will make this interactive, because we don't want to make this theoretical. You make it relevant to you. Think about a mistake you're holding on to. You want to make it old. The O is, you need to own it. You need to own that. And here's a few things that will allow you to own it. The A is, you need to be accountable for it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few A's. And here's the first A. Be accountable for it, because you need to take responsibility for it. You and I have talked about the time I've spent with Stan Lee, the co-creator of all these amazing Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers. And, he told me in the car one day, he was like, who's your favorite superhero? I was like, Spider-Man. He's like, with great power comes great responsibility. And in my mind, because I have my learning difficulties, I reverse things. I was like, Stan, you're right. But the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility for something, even our mistakes, we have great power to make things better. And so first thing is you to become accountable for it. Another A is just acknowledge that you're human. Acknowledge that it is a mistake and that you made it, because some people deny they deny that they made that mistake. And that's a challenge also as well. So you need to be able to acknowledge it in order to be able to, because some people, what you resist persists, and they fight with it and they try to defend it. But if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And so just acknowledge it. Another A is apologize. Apologize if you've hurt somebody. If this mistake costs somebody else outside of you, apologize to that person. You can keep it brief, but be clear and apologize in a way that is sincere, obviously.
Mean it.
Exactly. Because people, we all have this radar. We know if something's sincere or not, but apologize for it, because that's a way of owning it. You apologize for it, explain if you need to why it happened, and explain how it's never gonna, happen again, if you will.
And if you really mean it, you're not expecting the other person to necessarily do anything differently. It's you're apologizing for yourself.
Absolutely.
And the potential for healing.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. So you're accountable for it, right? And you acknowledge it, you apologize for it, and maybe you need to apologize to yourself also, because forgiveness goes a long way. I've spent a lot of time on, especially with my brain injury, through going through SPECT scans, having my brain analyzed, neurofeedback. And one of the best ways to get into those deep healing states the number one way that I found from personal experience is forgiveness. And studies done in self-compassion say that when you don't beat yourself up, because a lot of people, they are really hard on themselves. They ate that cupcake, right? Or they didn't work out that day, or they were a little short with their child or whatever it is. And they beat themselves up. And we find in the studies that actually kindness goes farther. When you're kind to yourself, meaning that, you say, I'm human. I had a long day and I did make a mistake, but you're kind with yourself as opposed to beating yourself up, you're more likely to follow through in the future. So the O in old is you make the mistake old, is you own it. Yeah. You're accountable, you acknowledge it, you apologize for it. The L in old stands for, of course, learn from it. Right? And like the whole idea behind making mistakes is that where's the gift in this? And I ask that myself all the time when there's a mistake that's made either by myself or somebody around me, is like, where's the gift? And usually the gift comes from a new distinction that you have or a new learning. And so when I'm doing this and I'm making a mistake and I've made a mistake, what I'll do is I'll even journal about it a little bit, because I was like, what was my intention here? What was the environment that allowed this mistake to happen? Was I multitasking? Was I taking too much, taking on too much? Was I exhausted and I didn't sleep the night before? Like what created this environment for this mistake to happen? Or did I not have enough information, right? And so I think that reflection is very important, because otherwise what happens is you don't handle the D, which so the O again is you own it. The L is you learn from it. And a big part of it for me is I journal about it, because I like to write about it and reflect on it. Otherwise there's no learning from it. And then the D stands for don't repeat it. Don't repeat it. Because if you truly learned from it, then you're not going to repeat it, because the first time you did, it's a mistake. But the second time you do it, it's a choice. Yeah. Because a lot of people, they say, and you've heard this phrase in self-improvement forever, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And, I don't know if that's insanity. Maybe it's just a poor memory because you don't remember the lesson that came from it. And I feel like a lot of people repeat mistakes, and the D again says, don't repeat it, because they don't remember the lesson or the pain that came. So they end up dating the same kind of person. Yeah. Right? They say they make the same kind of mistake with their health over and over again, or they hire the same person, or they again, wait and procrastinate on their taxes, or whatever those things are. And in order to not repeat it, I would say a few things. Maybe I'll make them, I like iteration, maybe a few P's. And I did a whole episode on this that went deep in it about making mistakes. P is like prepare next time. When you learn it, and you journal about it, you prepare for the next time. I would say plan. When this situation could come up in the future, plan ahead. And that would prevent you from making that kind of mistake, because these thought experiments, using your imagination to project into the future, and really imagination is really rehearsal. When somebody is fearful that they're going to make a mistake, whether it's public speaking, and this, like a lot of people, one of the big fears is people, when you and I go to events, even people don't know, like backstage, a lot of our peers are really scared to go on stage and do their work, but they're so mission driven. They have a moral obligation to do it. So that's the motivation. But preparation is just a signal to your mind. Fear is just meaning you need to prepare more. And so I would say the D is don't repeat it, because if you really do own it and you really did learn from it, then don't repeat that, because then it's a choice.
Jim, this is so powerful because people, even you asking me about, what have I done to get to the place that I'm at personally?
Exactly.
And it's literally like this formula that you just mentioned. I'm very, very big on learning from my mistakes. I'm very, very passionate about it. But it starts with owning it and saying, this is my responsibility. This is my bad. Even if it's not directly like you did the thing. Mm-hmm. If you were involved and you put something in position, or you made the choice to be involved in something, taking responsibility for whatever you can, because it gives you the opportunity to actually learn from it then. And so learning from it, and then don't repeat it, because man, like I want that lesson, because you better believe, like, I've got this one. I'm not going to do that again.
Exactly.
So just like I cut the cord, you know? And so if people can start to embrace this, and this, I love this, so powerful, this acronym of old. And man, it's like, it is old, you know, you got to let this stuff go.
Put it in the past.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing when it comes to mistakes is when I was talking about forgiveness, is just, you are not your mistakes. You know, your mistakes don't define you, but how you deal with those mistakes can define you. Yeah. And I'm saying that using this model of OLD, and again, going back to thinking, because this conversation has been all about thinking, I wish they taught this back in school, because this is our ability to make mistakes and to grow through mistakes. I feel like when we do these things also, it increases our integrity with other people, because they see we own it, that we learn from it, and we don't repeat it.
Right.
And I love what you said about how it falls on your shoulder, that even if somebody on your team did something, ultimately you had a part in it because maybe you hired that person, right, or it was a manage, and you take responsibility.
Gave them the job.
And we could appreciate,
or the task.
And we always appreciate leaders who do that. Yeah. Because we are forgiving when we see somebody is growing from their mistakes, and they're not putting it on somebody else and making somebody else blaming and all that other stuff. And we stay in our power. And yes, there could be some short-term pain, like there is doing a lot of any kind of growth. But I think that even, you know, if you do the easy thing, which is procrastinate and put it off and not take responsibility, then life gets really hard.
Absolutely.
But if you do the hard things and you own it and you apologize for it and you do everything you can to make it better and learn from it, then life gets a lot easier.
Definitely. I want to ask you about one more thing.
Yes.
There's so many things I could talk to you about.
Dude, I'm honored to be here.
I'm just thinking about some of the biggest issues that we tend to have as humans, but also as people, especially the Model Health Show community. People who are involved in this mission and this movement are really growth driven. Like, we want to be the best us possible. You know, we want to have the health that we truly want. We want to have the relationships. We want to have the careers that we want. But a big barrier for that is it's oftentimes not the environment, it's ourselves. We are our biggest trapdoor, right? This self-sabotage. We set ourselves up for failure. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of self-sabotage and any kind of insights you can offer to people to kind of move past that?
Completely. I mean, this comes down to, again, how we think about things and how we think about ourselves and how we think about our behaviors. And I'll give somebody who's listening this, I think everyone can relate to taking one step forward towards a goal and then taking 2 steps back, right? Why do we do things that could harm ourselves in the long term? Or we procrastinate. We know we need to do something, but we put it off and we don't have the discipline. And I'll give everyone a framework for this. Everybody's always trying to wonder why they're not doing a behavior. Why am I not working out today? Why am I not eating right today? Why am I not reading 30 minutes a day? Why am I not journaling or meditating, right? But they could use willpower and motivation, but it only gets you so far because there are other levels that they're not being addressed. Above the level of behavior is this level of capability. And this is your skill. You know, I'm really big, I know you are, in skill development, because we don't necessarily rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our skills, right? Of our training, if you will. And so are you trained in reading faster or remembering names or working out? Because you need that training in order to do that behavior, right? But even if you have the training and the capability and the skill, look at the level above that. And that's the level of belief and values, meaning that, let's say the behavior is you want somebody to read 30 minutes a day. And they even have the ability because they were taught, but they have a belief like, you know, they're not that smart, or they don't value reading. Or let's say in my case, remembering names, that's a behavior. I want to teach everyone to remember the names of everyone they meet. And maybe they even learn because they listen to a couple of podcasts on how to remember names, capability, but they have a belief it's not important, or they have a value that remembering names is not very important to them, or believe they have a bad memory, then it's not going to work, right? And you wonder why they don't do the behavior. And then finally, the level above belief and values is this level called identity. And this is something you and I talked about. 2 most powerful words are I am. So let's say the behavior is you want somebody to stop smoking, but their identity is I am a smoker. That's going to be a hard shift, right? Because people are going to try to fight on the behavior every single time, 20 times, 100 times a day, but their identity hasn't shifted, right? And so let's say the behavior is, they want to stop procrastinating, but their identity is I am a procrastinator. That's a challenge. The last level
Papers
below.
due tomorrow. I just got
Exactly.
started, baby. I had 2 months.
Exactly. And you wonder why people put it off. And then the level below behavior, as everyone's thinking about behavior that they've been putting off, is this level called environment. And what I would say at a high level, let's say they want to, their behavior is they want to read more, but their environment is they have no books. Or maybe the environment is too dark. Or maybe they want to, behaviors they want to meet more people, but the environment, they're not putting themselves in an environment to meet new people. It's going to keep them there. Or maybe they want to stop smoking, it's the behavior, but their environment is around smokers, right? Or they're putting their environment, they want to eat good food, but their environment is, they have all those crazy snacks.
They work at Chuck E. Cheese, like they're Chucky, like they're dressed up as a mouse.
And the reason why this work ultimately is because when we're talking about thinking is the process of asking questions and answering them. So, and even if people are listening, they're like, oh, is that true? Notice, is that true is a question. So the main questions back in school, watch this, are the 5 W's, right? The 5 W's and the H. So questions really are the answer, because that's what questions are. That's what thinking is. It's asking questions. The reason why an Elon Musk could come up with Tesla or something like that is he was outside the industry looking in, asked himself a new question. Why aren't we doing it this way with today's technology, right? That's what your power is, to be able to ask new questions. But going through the 5 W's and the H, the identity level answers the question of who. The level of behavior, of beliefs and value answer the question why. The level of capability answers the question of how. The level of behavior answers the question of what. And the level of environment answers the question when and where. So it's tight. And what I'm all about is having congruency. The reason why it's not just about when people see me memorizing 100 people's names in an audience or 100 words or numbers, or they know I read a book a day, is that there's a structure to this, because it's about, we use such a small percentage of our mental potential, right? But when it's completely aligned in your whole self, it's like whole self learning or whole self thinking. And then it becomes almost what appears to be effortless, to yourself, compared to like what people are struggling with. And part of it, again, is going back to this knowledge gap. Is there are some people who know, some people don't know. But I'm hoping during this conversation, the distinctions people learn, whether it's the 6 thinking hats or the old method about making mistakes and how to own it and learn from it and don't repeat it, or it comes down to like this framework, these 5 levels of transformation. It gives you these distinctions, so it allows you a new way of thinking about it. And because you're thinking about it different, you'll get different results. And isn't that what we all want?
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
Why do people not do what they know they should do? Why aren't they making progress? Why isn't common sense common practice? Everyone knows they should eat right. Everyone knows that they should move and exercise and prioritize their sleep and read every day, and they do their journaling. But why aren't they doing that consistently?